So, hi everyone. We are starting off with a video with a series known as how we can create or set up an architecture which can support zero users to up to 1 million users. Now, to explain this concept, it is not possible to explain all the concepts in one video because it's a journey of how we can create a setup which support zero users up to 1 million of users. It's basically a journey. So in one video it is not possible, so there will be a couple of videos, a playlist, a series in which we are going to understand this concept, right? Now, to starting off with this concept, to scale our architecture, to build our architecture, right? Uh, it is basically a journey, right? Journey of endless improvement and endless refinement, because a particular setup that support one user, that support one user request, at some point of time that architecture will not be able to support 1 billion users. So we have to make a refinement, we have to make improvements, right? Okay. Now, to starting off, the very core thing is that to build an architecture, right? To build an architecture that support 1 millions of users, our goal should not be just like create a subsystem that support 1 million users. No, our goal should be that create a setup, create a architecture that support few numbers of users, right? That support or that serve few users, right? And eventually we will make changes in that setup, that architecture that's eventually do our task, right? That support millions of users. Now, to starting off, the very core thing is that everything, right? Let's say we are considering that we are starting off with our project and there are a be zero numbers of users. Now we will be first discussing that how we can create a setup that support one user and eventually how it support 1 millions of user, right? Now the very first concept is a single server architecture. Up now the single server architecture is basically means, in this we are going to discuss that how we can create a architecture or a setup that support only one user, okay? Because everything starting from a single server only, right? So this is the very uh, core concept. Now let's start. Okay, so the very first topic is single server architecture. It basically means, let's say we are creating an architecture which support only one user. Our goal not just to create a setup for 1 million. Now our goal just is to create a setup that support only one user. To create a setup, it is very simple. For one user, it's simple. We can use a single service architecture. Now let's understand that. Now let's say you have created a, let's say, some application that is available in form of website, available in website or in a mobile application as well, right? Now user, like, consider an example of whatsapp is available as a website as well as a, sorry, as a web application as well and a mobile application, right? So consider that example that there is an application that is available both as a web application as a mobile application. So user can use any of it, or he or she can use both. Like in case of Instagram or WhatsApp, your WhatsApp is all also logged in the web application and also in the mobile application, right? So we are considering that case. So let's say, oh, there is a one user, and one user, we are talking about for one user only, right? And that for one user, he or she is using mobile application or the web application as well, right? Okay. So now any application that is available in form of web browser and a mobile application, right? It is considered as a client which can send the request, which can initiate the request, is the client. So client can be your web application or your mobile application, right? So let's say a user initiate a request, and the request is www.mysite.com. This is basically a website that a user want to access. Now when a user create a request, when he or she initiate the request, the request goes to the DNS. It does not directly go to the server. And in that case, I am considering that you are already aware of server, client, and DNS. So I'm not going to explain in depth what is a client and what is a server and DNS, right? So I'm expecting that level that you might have knowledge of these, like DNS server and client. You are aware of database, right? Because this is a part of system design, right? Okay. So client initiate the request. So let's say when you create a request that you want to access Google, right? So that request does not directly go to the server. What happens is, when we initiate a request, we basically means a client. When a client initiate a request, that request goes to the DNS. And you are already aware of DNS is domain name system. Domain name system. Now at networking level, what happens that when okay, so when a request initiate, it goes to the DNS. Why? Because DNS return the IP address of that domain name. Now consider that for a website that I am want to access is www.mysite.com, right? So it directly can't be sent to the web servers. Why? Because at networking level, I am talking about at networking level. At networking level, the server won't be able to understand the characters, right? It want numbers. That's why what happens, that DNS return the specific IP address related to this domain name. Now DNS is basically a paid service. It is a third party service that in this case what it does, it return the IP address of this domain name. Because why? Because server at networking level only understood the number. It does not want the characters, it wants the IP address related to this domain name. See, either we can access, let's say the domain name of www.mysite.com is 146.289.693. This is basically the, let's say, the IP address of this website. Now we can access any website through its domain name, but for a human being it is, for a human being to remember the domain name is quite easy. That's why we access any website using its domain name rather than its IP address, because it is like quite hard for humans to remember this long IP address. So either we can access the website using this IP address or by using domain name, right? If we know the IP address, we can use that. But for us, it is easy to remember the domain name, right? So, okay. So once we get to the IP address from DNS, then what it does, DNS return the IP address back to the web browsers. Yeah, it does. DNS does not directly send IP address to the web servers. First, when the request initiated by the client, the domain name send this request send to the DNS return its particular IP address, and that IP address is returned back to the client. Now the client send this request. Now what client does, client send the IP address, let's say this IP address, to the web server, because web server only at the networking level it only understood the numeric form. Okay, so once we got the IP address from the DNS, we send back it to the web server. Okay, same with the mobile application also. When the let's say we are using any mobile applications, and let's say our request is we want to access api.mysite.com, right? What the domain does is, first this request send to the DNS send the particular IP address of it, and then mobile application send this IP address to the web server. Okay, now web server will respond according to that request. If for that, let's say you want to access google.com, right? So you send the particular IP address of that, and if your request is, your IP address is correct, so web server will return you a HTML page, HTML page or JSON format, right? So at a very core level, we basically use this setup when we have only one user. For one user means one client will send the request. For that, first the request goes to the DNS, and then DNS return that request back to the client, and then client send the request to the server, and server will respond according to it. Now in this case, we have only one server, right? I have written some few stuff. Designing a system that support millions of users is challenging. This need endless refinement and improvement. As we discussed that एकदम से to build a system that support millions of users is not possible. We need to make a lots of changes, a lot of requirements, a lot of improvements we have to make. So first we create a setup that support only few number of users, and after a time like eventually we make changes into that architecture, and later on it support for millions of users. We need to gradually scale the architecture to support millions of users. Same thing that we gradually make changes. We don't ऐसा नहीं है कि वी एकदम से वी हैव क्रिएटेड मतलब हमने एकदम से एक ऐसा सेटअप क्रिएट कर दिया. नो, we eventually add this things to it. To start with something simple, everything start with a single server. With this architecture, as we discuss that for our core, we start with just a single server architecture. So this is the basic architecture. There are lots more things. There is a database also, right? We'll discuss it later. See, there is a one more diagram. So now we have understood this concept, client, DNS and web server, the working of that. Now let us understood the request flow. We have already discussed this, that either browser will send the request or mobile application, they will be the client. Client will initiate the request, right? It will send back to this request goes to the DNS return the IP address, and once the client get the IP address, the request will get to the web server, and web server will return a HTML page according to your request, right? This is what we have discussed so far. Next thing, user access the website through domain name. We have discussed it will access the website using domain name, or we can use the IP address. Usually the domain name is a paid service hosted by a third party. We have already discussed that DNS is not something we serve on our servers. No, it is a third party website, basically third party service. IP address return to the browser, DNS will return to the browser. We have discussed that. Via HTTP protocol, request is sent to the server. It basically means when a client get the request is sent to the server. How? Which protocol do we follow? We follow the HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol. We follow. Protocols are basically the rules, like to make a communication from one machine to another, with one machine to other machine, we need to follow some protocols. So for that purpose we follow HTTP protocol, right? Okay, now traffic source. So if you understood some sort of like this simple architecture, you understood that there are only two sources from where we get the traffic basically means here traffic denotes to the clients or the user, like request. Traffic basically means kitne request aa rahi hain on our server, right? So there are only two sources. Either we get the traffic from web browser or from the mobile application. Like let's say for instance, let's take the example of Instagram. On Instagram we get the request from either people are using the mobile applications, right, or people are using the web application. So request इन्हीं दो sources से आ सकते हैं. So this is basically the traffic source. So traffic came from two sources, either web application or the mobile application, right? So I hope you understood this part. Now let's move to the next part. Okay, now moving on to the next part, that is a database. Now we have understood this part, this architecture. In this architecture there is one more thing, that is a database. Now what is a database? You might have already know about database. That database is kind of storage, kind of a storage system where you can store the data. Now what data? Let's imagine Let's say that there is an consider Instagram. There is Instagram. Consider the case of Instagram. Now, let's see. There are lots of people on a daily basis who creates their account. They basically register on Instagram. It basically means they create their account, and while creating their account they provide their, let's say, phone number, right, email address. They give a username, right, their name, or their basically a profile photo, picture, or their bio, right. So these are kinds of thing that they basically, when a user, let's say a user creates an account on Instagram, so these are basically the things that he that one while a person creates an account on Instagram, these are the things that a user have to create, right. Bio, if you want to add, it's not mandatory to add a profile picture, is not mandatory, but these are the three things that are mandatory to have, to add on while creating an Instagram account, right. Okay, so what it does, that when a user creates an account, okay, for instance, a user is creating an account, he provide his email address, he provide his name, he creates a username, he creates a password for his Instagram account, right. So there should be some storage where we need to store these millions users of data, because now if we see Instagram, in billions of users are using Instagram, so there must be some storage where we store all these data, because लोग बहुत सारे people are posting reels and photos. There must be a place where we store these sort of data. So database is come into place. Database is the storage where we store all these data, because we need to store the credentials, we need to store all the data of the user in some storage. So database is basically the part, right. So in this context, once we have understood a single server setup, in single server setup we have client, DNS, and web server. There are lots of more things, but we will eventually upgrade this architecture, okay. Now we are upgrading this architecture by adding a database. Now let's say, for Instagram example, let's say a user uses a web application, right. So he creates a request of creating an account on Instagram. So the request passes on to DNS to access the Instagram website first. So you send the request, you get the IP address, and the request is sent to the server, and server return back to you, return you a HTML page, and the HTML page is basically Instagram website. Now you started creating a your account on Instagram, right. You passes all of these things. Now this password, username, profile picture, bio, this should be stored somewhere. So what you does, first आपने क्या request create करी, first you create a request to create an account. First you try to access the Instagram. So you created a request of access the Instagram website, right. Then you create request of creating a request for creating an account. Now this is a different type of request. In HTTP we have basically different HTTP methods. So when a client create a request, there are a lot of different HTTP requests that a user can create. User can create a get request, a post request, a patch request, or a delete request. There are a lot more, but most of the time we use the get request. Why? Because most of the time what get basically means. So get is basically means to access something. Access. Post basically means to create. Patch is used to update, and delete is basically to delete the account. So let's say we are using a same example, let's say Instagram. In case of Instagram, whenever a user want to access Instagram, it is a get request. Whenever a user want to access something, so it in HTTP request, it will always be a get request, right. Post is basically create. When you, let's say on Instagram, when you create an account, so it will be a post request. So now first when you create a request to access the Instagram, it was the get request. Now on Instagram you want to create an account, so it means you want to create something, so it will be a post request. So जब आप post request create करते हो, you have to pass some data. क्या क्या data? The data that let's say I want to create an Instagram account, so it will be a post request. In post request we pass on the data. Which data? Through which my account will be created. So my email address, username, password, and each and everything, right? So this post request with data, my post request with data, email address, username, password, right, everything, it passes on to the web server. Now web server will check, is it the get request? Agar it is a get request, so in get request you don't need to pass any data, because you just want to access the website, so you don't need to pass anything. But in case of post request, what we basically want, we want to create an account. So we want to create an account, we need to pass some things like password, username, email address, phone number, right? So with post request we pass the data to the web server. Now where the web server will pass this data? To create an account, this data should be stored somewhere. So this data will be stored in the database. अगर यूज़र ने कोई पोस्ट रिक्वेस्ट क्रिएट करी है तो वो सारे डेटा प्रोवाइड करेगा वेब सर्वर को, बिकॉज इंस्टाग्राम पे अकाउंट क्रिएट करने के लिए यू हैव टू गिव द ईमेल एड्रेस, यू हैव टू गिव योर नेम, यू हैव टू क्रिएट अ यूज़र नेम, राइट? सो वो सारा डेटा विल बी पास टू द वेब सर्वर विल चेक द ऑल द क्रीडेंशियल्स आर पासेस. अगर सारे क्रीडेंशियल पास हो रहे हैं, देन द डेटा विल बी स्टोर्ड इन द डेटा बेस. वाई द डेटा विल बी स्टोर्ड इन द डेटा बेस? बिकॉज द नेक्स्ट टाइम इफ द यूज़र अगेन वॉन्ट टू एक्सेस द अकाउंट, सो उस केस में क्या होगा, लेट्स से नाउ यू अगेन वांट टू एक्सेस द इंस्टाग्राम अकाउंट, राइट? यू वांट टू लॉग इन. नाउ इन केस ऑफ लॉग इन तुम्हें अपना इंस्टाग्राम और पासवर्ड देना पड़ेगा. इफ़ योर ईमेल आई डी एंड पासवर्ड, इफ़ दैट ईमेल आई डी इज़ ऑलरेडी स्टोर्ड इन द डेटाबेस एंड द पासवर्ड इज स्टोर्ड already in the database, so you will get your account, right? If not, then you have to create your account, right? So we need to store the data. हमारे पास user it is like there are possibility that user will create reels, user will post some photos on Instagram, so we need to store those data. So we'll store it in the database, right? Now in the database we can do the CRUD part. What does CRUD means? CRUD basically means there are CRUD operation. CRUD means create, read, update or delete. This is not equal to the HTTP request like get, post, patch, delete. No, this is something different. This is the basically type of request. What type of request you are creating, and this is basically the operation which you can only apply on the database. Now C basically means like if I want to create an account, so database में if I want to create an account on Instagram, right? So मैंने सारे data credential pass करे, right? Now these credential will be stored somewhere, so it will stored in the database. So in the database, when we need to store something, we are creating a so this is the create request, right? Create operation. We want to store the data. Now in case of read, we don't want to occupy storage of the database. We just need to we need to access the data, already data that is stored in the database, just we need to access that. Let's say a user want to access his profile, so in case of access it is a read. Read means basically want to get, so in that case it is a read operation. Update basically means, let's say you want to update the bio, you want to update the profile picture, it basically means existing data को change करना. And delete basically means, let's say you want to delete your Instagram account. So on database we can apply CRUD operation. Now where we can do this CRUD operation? This CRUD operation can be done via HTTP request. If you do the get request, it is a read operation. If you do the post request, it is a creation. If you do the patch, it basically means you want to update the existing data. If you want to delete your account, it is a delete operation. So what basically does, depending upon the web server, whatever type of request comes to the web server, according to that the CRUD operation will be applied to the database and data will be stored in the database. Now let's say user want to access the website, so user create a get request, that get request is passes to the database. Up now what type of CRUD operation is this? It is read. Now user want to access his profile picture. Now the request is passing on to the database, the read operation will be done into the database, and according whatever data will be returned, whatever data like let's say we have your profile picture, there is a user want to access his let's say his account, his profile, so we return the data, database will return the profile picture of the user back to the web server, and then web server will return the data to the back to the client. Okay, now what type of database do you need to use? It depends upon you, it totally depends on your usage, basically on your project. Either you can use the relational database or SQL database, or non-relation, और जिसको कहते हैं NoSQL database. In relational database, data is stored in form of row and column. I hope you already are aware, guys are already aware of that. And in non-relational database, data is stored in form of JSON format. In form of JSON is kind of a format. Data is stored in form of key value pair. So either you can use that database or you can use SQL, in which data is stored in form of table, means row and column. So it's your choice, depends upon your project, you can use any sort of database. So this is basically a single server setup. In single server setup, we have a single server, we have a single database. Now for one user, this architecture will work efficiently, right? Because there is only one traffic, now one user is trying to access the website, one user is trying to do the CRUD operation on the database, so there is no load, there is no लोड ऑन वेब सर्वर और नो लोड ऑन द डेटाबेस. मतलब बहुत ज़्यादा लोड नहीं है वेब सर्वर पर और ना ही बहुत ज़्यादा लोड है डेटाबेस पर, बिकॉज दिस सर्वर वी हैव क्रिएटेड फॉर ओनली वन यूज़र. सो इनिशियली हमारा माइंडसेट वॉज कि आई वॉन्ट टू क्रिएट अ वेबसाइट बट ओनली फॉर वन यूज़र, imagining that only a one user will be using my website. For that case, this architecture will work fine, right? So this is the core, this is from where we start the architecture. Now this architecture, we will stick to this architecture and gradually we will make improvement in this architecture. So I hope you understood this part. So this is the core, this is the basic level of architecture that we have to start with. By the time we will make the improvement, we will make the changes, and we'll see that how architecture is created for a million users, right? Okay, to serve millions users effectively. I hope you understood this part. Let's meet in the next video. Thank you for watching.